If you've been following from the beginning, you know that this Ibanez bass represents the first few ever mods on this channel. But with all the amateur workmanship and blemishes that inevitably entails, it became a little too easy to treat this thing pretty carelessly over the years, compounding several more projects onto it, with ultimately some slightly questionable decisions made just a few months ago. The true source of indifference or disinterest, however, honestly stems from the sliding pickup. Why pay for 2 pickups when you can just slide the one? It was a brilliant idea, and that first video turned out pretty metal in my opinion. But it was also literally metal, meaning that the drawer hardware was picked up in the magnetic field, creating a scratching noise during the sliding, so we couldn't really hear a smooth transition. And after hardly a month of bending and straightening an exposed wire during the motion, it broke just enough to only be playable in a few orientations, keeping in mind you don't accidentally bump the thing when handling it. So recently, trying to fix it up into some kind of practical bass again, I knew this particular mod needed a final revisit too, if I was gonna treat it with some proper respect. And after admittedly being stumped for so long, I think I may actually have the solution. This is Kevin from Said Too Much. A lot of us have been bouncing ideas around the sliding pickup since the first video. Some of the most accessible ideas may have been to 3D print something out of plastic to replace the drawer hardware, serving the same function minus the metal. Or, lo and behold, something hidden in plain sight like a paper trimmer could be the answer we're looking for. It's designed to slide easily, with even some downward force applied to hold the paper down. It may not be as mechanically efficient as the drawer hardware, but I've over-engineered things on the printer before, and this might be the best of the two. The second issue to solve was the breaking wire. Some motors and other electronics use things called brushes, sometimes a simple graphite block wire and spring, to hold contact onto a conductive surface while one or the other moves as to maintain a continuous circuit. So as a bit of an ambitious solution, I blindly ordered some random replacement brushes from China for God knows what exactly, that I was relieved to find were at least small enough to fit my needs. Although there were several options on how to position everything, I ultimately decided to put them on the side opposite the pinching system and side guiding rail for the sake of simplicity over optimization. The logistics will be explained more when we go over the installation, and it wouldn't hurt to just go back and rewatch that first video to understand the existing pickup sled and side shim we're using to connect everything. Hopefully with our fingers crossed, this design will work. I was able to dissolve some of the superglue on the old hardware with acetone and just pried off the sliding mechanism even if some of the wood had to come up with it. The spare paper trimmer I bought easily reduced down to a track and small mounting piece after removing the blade and grip, conveniently ending up at a comparable height to what the drawer hardware was. Now we at least need to make room for a new brush housing unit to fit on the underside of the pickup sled, and using some more stable Dremel routing techniques this time, I was able to make space everywhere in the cavity and just clean the whole thing up from the first attempt, making sure to extend the trench coming towards the electronics cavity. After measuring appropriately, the paper trimmer proved a lot easier to trim down to fit into the cavity than the drawer hardware did. Adding a slight shim compensating for any extra routed depth to the paper trimmer slider and painting everything black, it's all looking slightly less amateur this time around. I'm switching out the previous active EMG 707X guitar pickup for the simpler, passive, just a ground and output wire EMG 40Hz bass pickup. And although they're the same size, the pins that once came out on the side now come out in the center. Which is an easy enough fix using an X-Acto knife on the sled, leaving us room on the side to now superglue the brush housing unit down. It was a little tricky figuring out a snug shape to accommodate the diameter of the spring and hold firm the thinness of the graphite blocks, but I eventually came up with something in 2 pieces, feeding the 2 wires through a sort of lid before soldering them to their respective brushes, and then securing everything by supergluing the lid down. The pins coming out in the middle, however, also means that we're gonna have to put the sliding mechanism to the side now, opposite the brushes. This may not be ideal mechanically if we're grabbing that side to move everything, but again, this was the easiest way I thought I could successfully pull off a complex brush system. I also realized during this process that the springs on the brushes, unlike the graphite block, copper wires, and brass plates, are picked up in a magnetic field, so they could be a noise issue while sliding everything. Although, with such a snug fit, I don't anticipate them moving that much in relationship with the pickup. Now for the conductive surface, I went with copper tape that also has a conductive adhesive, meaning I can have a couple of layers on top of each other while still maintaining contact for a complete circuit. With the brushes being one on top of the other and at opposite ends, I can fashion two separate parallel surfaces running side by side and down, going back to the interrupted wiring that leads to a simple volume knob and output for now. I tried to arrange everything together loosely at first, actually needing to use a piece of paper to hold back the brushes while pushing the shim down, and using some final superglue connecting the paper trimmer track to the cavity and pickup sled, it all feels pretty permanently in there now. Initial sliding attempts were pretty stiff, and the brushes ended up actually scraping off some of the thin tape I was using. So just making sure the connection from the surfaces to the wires were particularly solid, I ended up having to sacrifice how far I can slide the pickup towards the bridge. You can already see how there's no room for anything to pass under that brush housing unit. But after lubing things up a little, I'm feeling pretty excited and say it's time to go ahead and plug this thing in to see if it actually works, after stringing it up to a suitable bass 6 tuning. So what do y'all think? Is this a satisfying fix-up that warrants our respect now? Or should we just continue the abuse and create even a more beat-up Frankenstein than we already have? A sliding pickup revisit was also previously brought up in another older video where I shoved 4 pickups into one bass, initially routing the entire cavity in a desperate attempt to put the drawer hardware maybe on the side this time, thinking it might help it not be picked up by the pickup. I ended up creating a blend chain of those 4 pickups to just hear the sound of each position blending into the next, to simulate that sliding mechanism as a plan B. You can tell this video has been something quite in the making. So draw your own conclusions and keep contributing your ideas, but with just some minor tweaks, I'm fairly happy to put this alongside my other go-to instruments to record with, fretless potential alone aside. Shortly before the wire started to break, I actually did record a solid instrumental with it, using the pickup in different positions to record each part in a song called Memory. With 2 instrumental albums out there already, I'm debating whether or not I should do a third, with this guy of course being a potential contender for a featured instrument again. So let me know what you guys think. Should I be bringing it into the recording studio or back onto the workbench? For now though, enough said. For early video access, raw instrument tracks, and more exclusives, find our community on Patreon and consider adding your support.
Said too much.